I would like to speak to you today about home and about belonging. But before I do that, I'd like to invite you to take a short journey with me. And if you're comfortable, you may close your eyes. Imagine you live in a big city and you have a very busy schedule, moving from a class to a meeting, then to the next class. And then holidays come up and you get to visit your hometown, the place where you grew up. Now imagine that place is smaller and quieter and things are calmer there. For the first time in months, you finally feel like you belong somewhere. So you decide to pack up your life from the city, move back to your hometown, and live happily ever after. You may now open your eyes. Okay, who found that exercise pretty relatable? And who has seen that exact same plot in a movie? Okay, so that old movie script is not my story about home and belonging. Actually, a very close friend of mine recently told me a story about the first time he visited his hometown after years abroad. With his permission, I would like to share that story with you today. So it had been 3 years since this friend had left his country to study abroad, and he was very excited to finally reunite with his friends and with his family. However, he got devastated to see how much he couldn't fit in anymore. He didn't enjoy any of the activities that the people there loved. He found it difficult to engage in long, engaging conversations with most people. And he even experienced depression as a result. Weeks later, this friend flew back to the country of study and has decided that he's never moving back to his home country again. Like the old movie script, this is another story about home and belonging that we usually hear. I have friends even within the UBC community who, because of the cultural backshock that they experienced when they visited, have decided to never move back to their countries again. That is not my story either. So, what is my story? Well, my name is Retsepile Sello, and this is my 5th year at UBC. I completed my undergrad last year, and I decided to stay for a master's program. I am an international student from Lesotho, Southern Africa. And my story lies somewhere in the middle between loving home and wanting to move back there after I graduate, and loving Canada and hoping to stay here and establish a life. Actually, after coming to UBC, I spent the first 2 years before I could visit home. And every time I didn't know how to do my assignment, or if I got a bad grade, I would feel extremely homesick. I would miss my family. And I would decide that the moment I finish my studies, I would leave Canada and I would never look back. But after those 2 years, I got to visit home. I remember I was greeted by the Suvi music. Everybody was speaking my language, and finally, people were pronouncing my name correctly. So in those first few days, I was surely so towards where home was for me, and I was still going to move back there. In a few weeks' time, however, small things started surfacing. For example, I wanted to put on earphones when I was going grocery shopping, but they were frowned upon because culturally, you have to be saying hi to people and responding to their hellos. I also wanted to read books in public transit, but this deeply embarrassed my mom because it's perceived as a show-off of your education. So suddenly my heavenly home wasn't that heavenly anymore, because the parts of my identity that I had discovered and nurtured in Canada didn't quite fit in there anymore. And I longed for the day that I would come back here. But as though my story wasn't already complicated enough, I decided to do something that most people try in their youth. I started a long-distance relationship. So now, every time I was back in Canada, my heart was always torn because a big part of my potential future was back there. And basically, I was undecided about this for the rest of my undergrad. And in 4th year, the big question came: are you going to return home after you graduate? And still, I had no idea. Sometimes I even guilt-tripped myself with pondering brain drain. And I thought I owed it to my country to go back. This is because according to the International Monetary Fund 2016 report, only 20% of the working class in sub-Saharan African countries have tertiary education. And over 50% of people who leave these countries have that education. Therefore, brain drain presents serious challenges to labor markets, to taxes, and to the overall future of these countries. Sometimes I think about these things and my indecision grows. But with most of my friends at UBC, when they're faced with this home question, their biggest concern is with their families. I mean, they have everybody there, their whole family, and they can't exactly uproot everybody, no matter how much they really want them in their lives. For me, I consistently feel guilty that I seem to be putting everything from my academics and my part-time jobs ahead of my family. I mean, right now I haven't been in Lesotho since 2017. I don't even know when I'm going there next. I call my family all the time, which I think works out, but they have told me that it doesn't. So there's a call for sacrifice there. Actually, as I was thinking about this talk, I did an evaluation to find out exactly how this indecision may have affected some of my actions. I also spoke with many of my international students friends, both in the US and in Canada, and this is what I found out. Firstly, the indecision may be affecting the stories that we tell about the places we have lived. In 2014, Chimamanda Ngozi gave a TED Talk on the danger of a single story. She explained how the narrative we tell about a culture may be used to form people's opinions about that culture. For example, in the whole UBC community, I only know one person from Lesotho, and that person is me. You also probably only know me. Therefore, the stories I tell may just be the sole reference on which you base your whole opinion. And if I feel connected and at home in Lesotho, I'm more likely to only share with you the positive side of the story, and vice versa. Alternatively, when I visit home, I'm potentially the only person who has been to Canada that my whole community gets to interact with. And if I don't feel like I belong here, then I'm more likely to only tell them the negative side of Canada. Actually, in my first 2 years here, I felt a deep sense of belonging in this place. I was even inspired to encourage other high school students to come and to explore international universities. So I started a mentorship program. I was working with Engineers Without Borders and with African Awareness Initiative. And we started mentoring youth in Lesotho and in Ghana, and it was going great. Around my third year, I lost that sense of belonging because of some personal problems. And that meant that I couldn't genuinely encourage other people to come here. And so that led to the fall of the mentorship program. The point here is for us international students to realize that, to be curious about the stories that we tell, about the places we have lived. Realize where they may be rooted from, and where necessary, adopt them with some objectivity. Secondly, I learned that not deciding where home is may be affecting people's level of commitment to some things. For example, a study was performed in 2009 at Okanagan Business School, actually, to evaluate how the international students' academic performance differed from that of domestic students. The results showed that domestic students' performance stayed rather steady throughout the years, while that of international students fluctuated significantly through the years. Obviously, there are many factors that play into this, but I believe that the question of belonging also plays a very important role. And thirdly, I learned that not deciding where home is may be affecting the opportunities that people decide to seek and to take on. For example, in moments when people believe that they will be going back to their home countries, do they make any efforts to seek career opportunities here in Canada? Maybe not. And during times when they feel like Vancouver is home for them and that they're going to stay, do they bother following trends in their home countries to see what gaps they can fill there? Also, maybe not. The point here is to realize that whatever decision you're making about where home is for you, it may be affecting some aspects of your life. The decision itself might change later, but realize that you will have to live with the consequences of the actions you took when you made the decision. Now to all international students out there, whether you're like the old actor in the movie that we earlier spoke about, and you have decided that you're only in this country for your studies, and the moment you finish, you're out of here, or whether you're like my friend, and because of the cultural backshock, you have decided that you're never going back to your home country, or whether you're like me, and you change your mind every single day about this home thing, please realize that it is okay. Actually, I know that this question of home and belonging is a struggle for most international students and to anyone who has ever lived the place where they grew up. But you may find comfort in knowing that it is okay to be undecided, or at least I think so. Actually, one of my supervisors said something very profound recently. She said, "It is possible that you may never fully settle in a place again once you move abroad, and that's okay." So home is where you make it at every passing moment. You allow it to change when need be. And you make your own decision at your own time. But of course, with consideration to Canadian immigration, but that's a totally different story. Now to you all here, please realize that the question of home and where people truly belong may be a concern for some of the people that you know. So I invite you to be supportive. If you see people withdrawing from some of their commitments, or if you hear them change their tone about the stories that they tell, curiously ask if this may be one of the things that's bothering them. Also, I realized that in our culture, it's pretty common to ask each other questions like, "Where are you from?" But these days, most people have lived in so many different places and they don't know which one to tell you about. So maybe we can consider reframing it. Ask people questions like, "Where were you born?" or "Where do your parents live?" Or with questions such as, "Where is your home?" we can consider reframing them to, "What do you like about Canada these days?" But for me, the one question that I get all the time, and it's super complex, is, are you going to return home after you graduate? Honestly, I have no idea. So rather ask me, where do you see yourself in a year's time? The answer to that is UBC, because today I do belong at the University of British Columbia. Thank you.